Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for Oxtails and Cocktails. We're really excited to be here doing this monthly virtual program that we've concocted. Oxtails and Cocktails happens once a month, every month with folks from our Oxbow community. And we have the lovely pleasure tonight of being joined by Martha Poggioli. I hope you pronounce that right. It's like ravioli. She was our 2019 fellow, and she spent the entire summer at Oxbow. Excuse the car alarm that decided to go off just now. But let me tell you a bit about Martha. Martha Poggioli is from Brisbane, Australia, and she's an artist working to uncover patterns, occurrences, and languages hidden within the vast constellation of human-made things. Exploiting methodologies and legacies of designs, she investigates material histories to address personal questions relating to embodiment, representation, and identity. Interested in banal objects, unnatural bodies, and their polymorphic relationships, her work examines how systems of production and cultures of consumption, evolving in tandem, form one another. Poggioli holds a BFA from Queensland University of Technology in Australia and an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where she has been based since 2017. She will be in conversation tonight, like all of our Oxtails and Cocktails, with our executive director, Shannon Stratton. And our cocktail tonight is a dirty martini, definitely a classic. But with the twist, Martha likes hers with gin and a chilled glass with a thin rim. I'm enjoying a gin cocktail with orange juice out of my oxtail, not oxtail, but oxbow glass that we made directly on our campus in our glass studio. We had some information in our earlier slides on how you can get yourself some of those glasses as well. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon to introduce and talk a bit about Oxbow and get started with Martha.
I have to unmute myself. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, Martha has left the room. No, she's back. Hi, Martha.
Hi.
Hi. Martha, where are you joining us from tonight?
I am in Cleveland, Ohio.
And you are a residency there, right?
I'm in a residency here right now, facilitated through SPACES, just a fantastic organization and gallery here in Cleveland. And I'm working with two amazing organizations within Case Western Reserve University to, I suppose, I wouldn't say finish, but bring a big project to finality in some sense while I'm here. So in the form of an exhibition. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
What we're known for on Oxtails and Cocktails is long-windedness, as I'm sure Sierra can attest to. She has to cut me off sometimes. So thanks for being our guest tonight, and for everyone who came, was able to make it. Oxtails and Cocktails is our once a month program where we have a conversation. I have a conversation with someone from the larger Oxbow community, so that we can collect the stories of this massive, extensive network of people who have participated in Oxbow, love Oxbow, and have had some kind of relationship to it over the years in a variety of different ways. So in a way, it's like collecting oral histories. We talk to artists about their practices, about projects they're working on, and we hear stories about their time at Oxbow. Or the relationship to Oxbow, whatever's kind of pertinent at the moment. Martha has been gracious enough to join us tonight. We're really going to talk a lot about fellowships and residencies and why those kinds of experiences and opportunities are so valuable to artists as they start their careers, and how valuable they are to their practices or projects that they're working on. But every time we host an Oxtails and Cocktails, we ask our guest what kind of cocktail they want to drink. I failed tonight because I am not drinking a dirty martini for a couple reasons, but I'm drinking a glass of wine. But I am in solidarity with Martha's dirty martini. Why is that your favorite drink, Martha? And you are a gin martini person, apparently.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was unusual. I thought all martinis We're made of gin.
I don't know. I feel like I know a lot of vodka martini people, so it might just be, who you're exposed to. I know more vodka martini people than gin martini people, but I prefer gin over vodka personally. But
Naturally. I mean, I don't know why you drink a vodka martini just personally, but there's no judgment. I mean, obviously I'm judging right now, but that's just because I'm biased in one direction. With regard to,
tell us why that's your cocktail of choice.
I'm not sure. I think it's really easy to make. You just need 2 ingredients and you can split it in half, and you just need, some ice. And if you have olives, it's a bonus. So you can get it wrong, but then if you get it right, it's delicious, I feel like you can have a dirty martini like before dinner, during dinner, and after dinner. Like it can be with anything really.
Right. It's an all-purpose.
Oh.
You were pretty particular about the olives when you sent us the recipe. I noticed. You said not pit. No, wait. You said pitted, not pitted. Pardon me. Not.
No, I can't eat pitted olives. They're
right.
really sweet, and I feel like they've been violated by someone before I got to interact with them. And for me, that's kind of weird. I don't know, the olive is no longer viable in my eyes. And then when I squish it between my teeth and it's pitted, it just kind of, the olive, yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know, I can't stomach it. So yeah. This is obviously a issue that I need to work out personally, I think.
Definitely no blue cheese olives.
Absolutely not. No, that's offensive to the palate, I think.
Michael, you're such a Virgo.
True, unfortunately for everyone around me.
So we're going to start off tonight hearing about your art practice, what you're working on, what you have been working on, and then we'll get into a conversation about sort of where you're at. We've got a couple different sort of stories that we're going to talk about tonight, but just so everybody knows who you are and what your work looks like, will you share your screen?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me just, oh wait, go back to that. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to share screen.
Oh, that blue, go to that green share screen button there at the bottom.
Oh, it's right in front of me. Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is me in Chicago in probably, I think, 2017 or 18, just after I'd arrived there. This is just a reminder slide for me to let you all know that I had a life in Australia before I came to the States, and I was engaged in various design work kind of adjacent to art. So I made clothing and I designed clothing and textiles, and that's what I'm trained in my undergraduate degree. And I also worked in museums and art institutions, kind of developing exhibitions. So this is a work that I made in 2015 that I brought to Chicago. It's called The Tent Dress. And it was sort of about me exploring kind of social and personal and political ideas through a kind of long form performance. So this is a garment that turns into a tent, and I lived in it for 7 days, and I stayed at the houses of 7 friends in Melbourne in Australia, and sort of documented the experience. And here it's kind of me reigniting the object in Chicago. So that was me arriving in Chicago. But for the last 3 years, I suppose I've been working, on many things, but the main project has been looking at this history of objects that live inside the body. So the category really is pessaries and intrauterine devices, and there's sort of a very rich history of these objects that I have been cataloging and reproducing in various ways. So I think I've mostly been looking at form and making form for the last 3 years. And so, I was working in clothing, thinking about form as body, and that sort of started to shift for me in the last 3 or 4 years. Coming to the School of the Art Institute and doing an MFA helped me kind of open up those things. So now I'm sort of looking at design and using languages of design, but it's sort of coming out as sculpture, which is something I thought for a little while, but now I'm just going with it because it actually feels right. So I do these digital collages, and this is an accumulation of objects that I've been cataloging through kind of digital sources. This is one typology of objects, kind of a sliver of a much larger history of objects that I've been collecting, and each drawing is represents a patent. So an object that's been put through the kind of like patenting or patenting system. And then I've been remaking these objects. So pessaries are objects that can be contraceptives, but they also kind of provide various modes of support for the interior architecture of the body. And this is a kind of an accumulation of some of these forms. They come in different sizes, not similar to clothing really. The object that you see kind of like hanging off it or holding the objects is a device that's used to insert them. It's a very old device, or a remake of this old device, so it looks kind of, I don't know, prehistoric. This is the object that really started it all for me in terms of particularly metal, which is what I'm doing a lot of right now. So I got really obsessed with this bronze torus donut object from the Roman era, and there's actually multiples of them that kind of show up in museum collections. This object still exists in the form on the market today in the form of a pink plastic. So it kind of in my travels through time, and so this object is kind of like its aura is very important for me. It was like the history of it. I don't know. It's become almost spiritual at this point for many reasons. And so I went through the process of remaking it. So this is a kind of scale 1-to-1 replica of it. And this is the object I'm referring to here on the top. Sorry, I'm pointing to my screen, the top left.
Sorry, Martha, can you say again what this object was for?
Well, it's all speculative when it's, placed in, a history that's so far away from where we are at this point. But it's the curator who holds this object in their collection thinks that it was a contraceptive device in part, but that there was actually another object that pierced through that donut hole, and in piercing through it would go through the cervix for safe or protected contraception. But that would have been very painful, and I've spoken to other historians and experts in the field who kind of dispute that. But this general object form shows up all over the place in this history of things, not necessarily always in bronze, but there are various forms that kind of come up over and over again. So sometimes it's for contraception and sometimes it's for kind of intrigue or sort of like a whole array of kind of support devices. So bronze may have not been the best thing to kind of support prolapse, but plastic would have probably made more sense, for example. So, but I mean, there is just such a huge history of these objects, particularly from the last few hundred years. just given the kind of expansion of industrial production systems and the kind of medical world becoming the way that it has become. So these objects kind of just change very slightly over time. And I'm just very interested in learning about their hidden world. So another bronze casting from a drawing from a book from someone who found a bunch of ruins and a series of surgical devices from J.S. Milne. And I guess sometimes I'm scaling up the objects. I kind of like to put them at a human scale, sort of confronting us in some way, reminding us of what's inside of us, maybe. I'm not sure. These are surgical meshes. And this is a whole other thing, but still thinking about the body. These are pieces that kind of came out of Oxford. Sorry, just plunked them in here, Shannon. Sorry.
Do it.
And my studio at Oxford. So there's that big U work in progress. And the photolitho that I made in Downing Miller's class that ended up becoming a sculpture because I couldn't bear for it to be a print. And then me working with Davis. This is an image of me looking like I made it, but really Davis is the pro. So sorry, I'm scrolling back and forth, and now I think my PowerPoint is frozen. So this is the glass speaker that I made for this piece here. It kind of cries the work, like it's kind of audio work. So that's a very fast tangential overview of what I've been doing for the last few years. This is a brief interlude, which was a party at Oxford, which I thought I'd just pause there.
You know what the party theme was?
This was, what was the name of this party? I think it was Michael's birthday, and it was all white, and you had to drink wine so that you would be covered in wine at the end of the night.
Or was it wine, red wine with clothes?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
White clothes, red wine. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
So, Martha, I'm really interested in how you started out working in fashion design or in clothing design. So you were thinking about kind of exterior protection, and then your work evolved into this sculptural practice that was investigating kind of interior protection or interior wearables, you know. Do you see a strong relationship to your past history in garment design and being somebody who worked in clothing to this transition to making work about what we put inside of our bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been reflecting a lot this past year, and actually realized that when I did my undergrad, I was making sculpture about anatomy. That was not very well received at all because I was in a fashion program, and I fought it for a really long time. But I think it's also because my work really is about design, and so I was working, as a designer, and the interest for me is the kind of the object and its relationship to body. So yeah, absolutely. And these objects, for me, there's just something very interesting about the way that they talk about, who we are as a larger society. in ways that maybe we don't think about when we're articulating it with language. I think, you know, words, objects don't have words, but they say things that we can't say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, it ties to kind of what I was about to ask you, which is, could you say more about what it means to make art that is about design? I think there's a lot of interesting like slipperiness between what is an art object, what is a design object, what is a craft object, and where is the kind of overlap and connection between two of those or all three of those things. And so I think it's interesting to make a statement like, well, my objects are about design, as opposed to being design objects in and of themselves. And yeah, I think what you just said there about objects kind of saying things feels kind of interesting to me to think about maybe how designed objects are almost instructive. You know, they're not, or maybe the struggle for design objects to break away from their instructiveness and be more poetic, but like they're very practical, they're very pragmatic things. And that's maybe that's a challenge all the time to the designer to negotiate other possibilities for designed objects. Um, anyways, can you, what are your thoughts on what it means to be making art about design? What is the, um, I guess, what are some of your kind of critical positions on the designed object and how it circulates in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would want to know how to even define design as well, you know, because I feel like in some ways design is like a tactic that kind of shows up in many different forms. And about design these days is this sort of like, you know, like this kind of like clean, you know, well packaged form that like does the thing that it says it's going to do, right? But actually, like design is really messy and sticky, and it has, I mean, I'm probably contradicting the way that I work. I'm just thinking about this right now as I say it out loud, because my work is is you know, very clean and considered in terms of its finish. But I think I sort of like to exploit that vocabulary or language visually. But I don't know, I feel like particularly with these objects that I'm looking at the moment, and I'm so in it because I'm, you know, in the middle of this project, I'm kind of interested in the way that the objects create. Like I feel like objects make us, or they do something to kind of form our identity, but that we form the objects as well. It's like this feedback loop that happens. And I think that the intrauterine devices and the pessaries, like using those objects does something in like performing the metaphor of that, but in actual relationship with body. You know, like you insert these devices inside of the body, but they actually begin to kind of form whatever, like their participation or disruption inside of the body then creates the form of this hollow organ, right? So for me, this kind of like idea of also what it is to wear or to participate in, like have a relationship with an object, becomes this kind of like weird, mutually beneficial like feedback loop. And it's very perpetual and it's circular. And, you know, that whole torus object for me kind of like does that. It's the toroidal kind of space that's kind of like multiplying and contracting, you know, all at once. It's like this inner logic of form that seems to kind of like move through time and space.
I'm really loving, since you said it, I've just been really holding on to this really simple idea that design is a tactic, and that's and to kind of make work that is about tactical objects. You know, of course, art is, you might argue that art are tactical objects as well, but it's very that is you know, very blatant. You know, we know that art, we assume that art has a message that it's trying to tell us, but there's something, you know, maybe a bit sneaky about design as a tactical object and the way that it is the way that it is participating with our bodies in ways that it's like sneaky about it. You know, we're not, it's design is so seductive that we forget that it is shaping or reshaping us and our behavior to some degree when we're using those things. Designed objects are wonderful at making really intimate relationships with us that like our criticality might slip away a little bit when we're, you know, building those relationships with things. So that's something I think about maybe with your work, is that it's quite sneaky, you know, it's quite seductive. These are beautiful, drippy, slippery, shiny, smooth, slick things that kind of sneak up on the viewer a little bit and maybe pass as other kinds of objects.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a tactic, I suppose. I do like that idea, but it's kind of, yeah, I do want to kind of seduce and lure you into looking at the work and kind of like finding out how it's going to imprint on you as well. Because I feel like, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about abstraction in the last 6 months, maybe like specifically in the last few months, and how kind of abstraction from specificity I don't know, there's something there's like I feel like what I'm doing is like making abstraction from specificity. You know, each of these objects are defined, but that doing that enables a viewer to look at the forms and experience these objects in a way that you don't know what you're looking at straight away, and so you can kind of arrive at whatever conclusion that kind of like tactical feedback loop is doing between you and the thing. If that makes sense at all. I mean, I was unsure and concerned for a long time about whether or not, you know, like the tactic of scale, for example, has been very important from an intuitive level for a long time, but I wasn't sure how it would play out. I kind of just had to follow it.
Right.
But actually, I find that scaling up the objects is doing something and suggesting body, at least for me it is. And so that's actually kind of reinforcing this thought that I had about this feedback loop of, you know, body and object forming each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that it's interesting. I was thinking like, well, it's quite easy. It's interesting how the things that you're working with can be abstracted simply by a scale shift, that simply by displaying it differently or changing the scale or material, you are abstracting it from what it's recognizable as. And it's not, you don't have to stretch it, or you don't have to dissolve it, or you don't have to explode it. Simply scaling it up or hanging it in a different way abstracts our idea of what that object's original or initial function is for.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, for me, making the objects in the first place was really just an attempt to see them and like to know them, because I was finding, you know, and up until I've come to Cleveland, like all I've been doing is researching these objects through a screen. And, you know, unless you go to the gynecologist, you're not going to be able to kind of just like go to a store and like pick up these objects. And to me, that also feels a bit weird, like this kind of like, there's like a disconnection between this kind of like tangible history things that I'm kind of implicated in, being, you know, being a woman and having a reproductive body in such a way. But I, until coming to Cleveland, like hadn't tangibly touched these objects. So I was trying to recreate them for myself. And so it's also kind of performing the tactics of design by trying to see it, you know, going through those phases of trying to understand what it is.
Yeah.
So even looking at the patent drawings and trying to kind of recreate them and reverse engineer, right? That kind of like that whole process is a way of knowing what it is that I'm seeing. The kind of the logic of a patent really hinges on specificity and abstraction. So, you know, the author has to be very specific so that they abide by the regulations of the patent system. But there's also often a lot of abstraction that kind of conceals very important proprietary information, or kind of enables the right to kind of like have a larger space in the kind of plane of intellectual property rights. So that sort of also makes it open for interpretation and abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like performing the tactic of design as well. It's just, you know, we're pushing it into kind of the gallery abstraction maybe.
So you're bringing up something that is a good maybe pivot point for us right now. You're talking about going and seeing these objects in person, because your residency at Spaces in Cleveland is putting you in contact with a collection there that you're visiting to do your research.
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I just realized that I didn't put any images in this slideshow on the district collection research that I've been doing, so I apologize. Oh. I have lots of images. But so the District Medical History Center at Case Western Reserve University has a really extensive collection of these objects. And a lot of it's derived from this one donation from a gentleman named Percy Sky. It's kind of the Percy Sky collection, but there's also a lot of other objects in this history of things that this amazing museum holds. So they were kind enough to, you know, let me come and look at the collection. The whole thing has actually been in the works since before COVID, so I feel very grateful to be able to be here despite the whole situation right now. And I guess I'm doing two things at Dittrich. I'm sort of looking at the objects and, you know, documenting and kind of like being with them. But I'm also trying to figure out what it is to be an artist and to research in a place like that. So TBD on that.
But that's why is that why you applied to Spaces? Was it specifically to get to spend time with that collection?
Yes. I'm just going to put my light on
the. Oh, sure, yeah. It's getting dusky in there.
Is that better? I think that's better. Yeah. So yes. So I knew that. I was going to Kohler, and I knew that this museum, this collection, was in Cleveland, and I had the opportunity to make a proposal for Spaces, and it just kind of seemed like the perfect situation. Although in hindsight, well, actually not in hindsight, I've known this since the beginning, it really would have been more logical to have done research at Dittrich and then developed the research and gone to Kohler. So I've kind of done it a little bit backwards.
Yeah.
But hey, that's life.
So that's that kind of leads us into the conversation about doing residencies. As Sarah said in our intro, you were a 2019 fellow at Oxbow. I think probably many people who joined us this evening probably know about the fellowship, but people who might watch this later may not. The fellowship program is a summer-long engagement with Oxbow where you do kind of a work study trade. You take a few classes, you do some work for Oxbow, you have a studio, you work with visiting artists who come in and mentor you while you're here for the summer. It's a pretty multifaceted kind of residency program, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it changes your life.
It changes your life. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then I just want to hear about, you know, that, and then we'll talk about, you know, the residencies that you went to afterwards. But when we were chatting on the phone on Sunday, we got into this, like, what is it that's so life-changing about these kinds of residency experiences for artists, especially early on in their career?
Totally. So we're talking about Oxford now. So the trajectory is like I went to Oxford, then I went to Kohler, and now I'm in Cleveland. And just as one other thing that I forgot to mention, so I'm in Cleveland, I'm working at Dittrich, but I have a studio in this amazing facility called ThinkBox, which is also part of Case Western University. Thank you, everyone there. They have opened up their amazing facilities to me to finish this monstrous project. So whatever happens with this project, it wouldn't have been without the support of that. So it's so where I am right now is like a three-pronged residency. But flashback to Oxford 2 years ago, you want me to talk about that, Shannon? Where should I even start? I didn't even know.
Where should you start? I don't know. Talk about why you wanted to do that. You were coming out of grad school. What was attractive about doing something like the Oxbow Fellowship?
Well, so I'd heard about Oxbow first from Q, who I think everyone knows. And he had said to me when I first arrived at SAIC, well, you need to go to Oxbow. And I didn't really know what Oxbow was. I really didn't know what it was until I really arrived there. Maybe 2 weeks after I arrived, I kind of got a sense of what it was. But I wasn't really prepared for what it was. Like, I think it was a really great post-MFA recovery session, which was really needed. I think that's really important for artists. If they're anything like me, artists, I'm making generalizations, burn themselves out. I'm just talking about myself now, really. Burn themselves out easily because they're so committed and passionate about what they're doing. So going to Oxford was really generative in that way because it really helped me to kind of recover without falling into kind of like a post-MFA moment of doom, perhaps. The other thing that was so amazing about that place was that I actually got to perform and then practice being an artist. Like I've always kind of worked adjacent and had been making things here and there and engaging in the art world a little bit, but had always I'd never really said like I'm an artist. I'd never really been around so many artists and been able to kind of like validate my own kind of like identity as an artist and also do that for others. And that's kind of one of the intangibles of going to a place like Oxbow that I think is really important. Because I think there's a tendency in the real world to sort of play down that thing as like as a side hustle or as something that you're doing that you kind of don't really want to talk about, because you have this job that like pays your rent or something, because we all have that, And so being there was like a sustained act of performing this idea of like, maybe I can be an artist. That was really important. Really important.
Do you feel like that gave you a new or a different kind of confidence to pursue other kinds of opportunities or like the Kohler residency? Did it change your sort of perception or confidence in yourself as a practicing artist in terms of the types of opportunities you might pursue going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's like any professional or any kind of pursuit of an occupation. You decide what you want to do and you kind of work your way up a ladder of kind of like things that you want to achieve. And doing Oxbow was like such an important rung in that, like in the early kind of like, I feel silly for talking about a ladder metaphor with residencies, but it definitely felt like it like not only kind of like being the artist there, but like you're around all of these people who are being an artist, and that there are so many different ways to do it as well. So, and it's not just, you're there with, well, I'm speaking as a fellow, you're there with people who are working alongside you as staff, and they're all artists, and then you're meeting the visiting artists, and you're meeting the teaching artists, and you're meeting the other students who are coming in who are all artists. So you're seeing all of these different ways to kind of, perform whatever it is to be an artist in the world, you know, because it's always changing, right? But to kind of see all of the differences in one condensed place was far more amplified than art school.
Yeah. Did it change your work at all?
No, I don't think it did. I think it's actually made me more particular about the kind of work that I want to make, which is problematic because I'm so particular about the kind of work that I want to make.
Yeah.
Which makes it really, really difficult for me to make the work that I want to make. So I think it made me, yeah, actually probably more headstrong, which is probably a problem.
Why did such an intensive experience make you more particular, more headstrong? I think that's really interesting. It didn't. I can imagine feeling concerned that maybe the exposure to so many artists and ideas might knock somebody off their path, or undo undo a sort of perception about what kind of maker they were, but it actually honed your sense of kind of purpose in your studio.
Yeah, totally. And I would say that I've had a studio practice for a really long time, and then it just wasn't always in the pursuit of producing what people would maybe call art. So that's one thing to preface this with. But I was sort of reflecting on the works that I made after Oxbow, and sort of looking at things that I experimented with and played with at Oxbow were really generative, but also generative in a way that I was like, okay, this is not something that I want to move in a direction of, and having that opportunity to kind of play in that sticky, uncomfortable place at a place like Oxbow is, I think, also really important, because you're surrounded by this sort of supportive atmosphere, and you're really pushing out a lot of ideas. And a lot of those ideas are actually social ideas as well. They're not necessarily ideas that are made in studio. So I actually don't feel like I made a lot of stuff at Oxbow, but I actually developed a lot of really important ideas and kind of beliefs about the work and about myself as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking a lot recently about sort of productive time versus unproductive time, and that kind of unproductive time is so important for anyone, but for people who have the responsibility to kind of generate creative ideas for work, I think that unproductive time is really important, and places like this really fuel that,
It's like a sabbatical from productivity or something.
Well, yeah, and also just go away to this idea of productivity as well, because you can't be productive all the time, and that those really important ideas can't be arrived at under duress, So
it's pretty different than going to Kohler, to a factory, probably as your next residency. I mean, you're obviously familiar with Kohler because you were there as a resident. I've been a curator for Kohler several times, and know the residency. I've never been a resident, but I'm very familiar with how the arts and industry program kind of operates. And so, yeah, I think it makes a really interesting contrast to an experience like Oxbow that is, you're a part of the staff as a fellow, but you're a resident, but you're a student. And it's a lot of play. It's maybe a more social space. That's so different than to go to Kohler and be in a factory, literally embedded in it, to make work. And it's intense in there, especially in the ceramics studio, or in the ceramics part of the factory. I think that's what your slides are about too. Can you tell us about that experience and contrast, and how you ended up deciding that Kohler was the place for you next?
Yeah, so this is Oxbow, and this is Kohler. So just to preface, there aren't any photos allowed inside of the factory. So all of the photos that I'm going to show you are just inside of my studio. And the studio is smack bang in the middle of the foundry, which is where I was. There's also the ceramics studio, which is very humid and disgusting. I'm from like the most humid place in the world, well, a very, very sticky part of Australia. And that ceramic studio is just really hectic.
Yeah.
But the foundry is its own brand of filth. I'm pretty sure the last time I washed my hair before I left, I had to wash it 4 times before the water ran clean, because there was just like so much iron in my hair. So this is the studio. It's a dream come true. You know, for anyone who likes to make things.
Were you accepted as a ceramics or as a foundry?
Oh, no, foundry.
Oh, you were in foundry. Okay, sorry. Go on.
I'm just gonna, sorry, I keep landing on this photo. You know what, I'm not gonna scroll up. I'm gonna just ask you to remember that donut object that I showed you all earlier. So I actually made a proposal to go up to Kohler before I finished grad school. It's quite a long process, and I just thought, like, I had been wanting to make these pessary objects really big intuitively for a long time, from the very start. And so I was just like, I want to go up to Kohler and make these large pieces in a similar way that you would make a bathtub. So I got to go to Kohler after Oxbow and spent a long time up there, actually. So I arrived there at the end of January, and then this pandemic thing happened, and actually ended up staying there for 8 months. Not all of that time was in the foundry because there was a shutdown. So I was like producing, and then like Holt shut down. Martha became a gardener in Kohler Village, and just sort of like waited for 2.5 months to see whether or not the foundry would reopen. All of the other residents went back to their houses, and I just stayed there and like waited, basically. But got to go back in the summer. Was very grateful that everyone was just so generous in allowing me to stay while we figured things out. And you know, a lot of like this period of Martha in the garden at Kohler, I'm not sure what's going on with anything. I was freaking out like everyone else might have been with COVID, but I was doing a lot of sort of like thinking about what these objects were again, because it was sort of like an unceremonious, like, we can't, like, we're going to shut down the residency momentarily. And when you're kind of like pulled from a very productive studio situation, and all these like giant objects that I've been making, sort of just like sitting there, so I spent a lot of time kind of like thinking about what these things were again. It was kind of like a double loss, you know, kind of like you're trying to make these things and then you get shut out of your studio. And so like thinking again, like, what is this thing that I'm making, and what are these objects that I'm trying to see? So I made a lot of plaster patterns and then made these sort of shell castings. So the plaster patterns are on the right here, and then on the left is one half of a pattern or a form to be cast, and then I laid these like big pieces of clay in to kind of line them and give them form. Also raspberries at Kohler, so good.
The only resident because of COVID, or were you the only artist who was there?
During COVID, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really weird and beautiful there. I got to see spring arrive, and Kohler Village, for anyone who's, it's so quaint. It was magical. Such a beautiful, anyway, back to IUDs in the foundry. So making cores pieces. So this is a 3-part mold. Filth. this is all just process, but lots and lots of sand. Oh, I think this is a video.
Oh,
Please interrupt me also, anyone. I don't know if this is interesting or I don't really know. I kind of just planted these all in here. I thought people might like to see.
yeah. I mean,
Love the hoist was my best friend. Because like as a petite femme, like it's so hard trying to make big stuff. And trust me, like using the hoist is still a massive workout. But this thing, like, just amazing. Because the sand molds that you have to make for the forms are just massive. I mean, I'm just using the sand here to actually make a pattern. So I poured plaster into the sand and then like used the plaster to make another form. So a lot of like iterative like feedback of form becoming form. So
do you have much assistance when you're in the residency at Kohler from like people who work in the foundry or experienced in the foundry? Or are you kind of on your own?
yeah, so the process is so there's an amazing technician, Gareth, who has so much experience making metal work. And he is there to kind of facilitate your relationship with the kind of like larger factory that's happening around you. But I mean, after you're sort of like, after you're habituated in the space, the process is really to kind of insert your pieces into the production line. So you kind of work with the people who work in the factory and you get to know them. It's a lot more difficult to get to know people when there's a pandemic going on, but they were all really interesting, and I think kind of bamboozled that I was doing what I was doing and that I was from where I was from. But, you know, kind of worlds apart, really interesting. I mean, as an Australian, to be able to go to these different parts of the United States has been a real privilege. You know, I'm getting a really amazing tour of the Midwest, so I'm feeling very grateful for that.
I guess, yeah, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Illinois.
Yeah, it's really like what's next?
Omaha.
What's the state? Omaha?
Yeah, you need to go to Bemis or something.
Yeah, that's the logical next step, actually. So, yeah, just like lots of filthy making metal. Is this a video? I'm not sure.
I like these little videos.
This was like the point where the Tetris game had become kind of like there was so much going on in the studio. So it's just like a matter of like moving stuff around all the time. This was after I came back in, and I actually got the whole studio to myself. Usually you're splitting the studio between yourself and another artist. So as soon as like I got the whole space to myself, I kind of like spread out, which is kind of probably a natural thing. Your culture, maybe. Oh yeah, sand, lots of sand, like just everywhere, all the time.
Like Oxbow.
Yeah, but Oxbow is kind of like situated in this magical place, and then sort of, I mean, Kohler is a beautiful town, but once you're inside the foundry, it's just like noise and definitely lots of decibels, lots of noise and just kind of lots of grime and lots of sand. So different kind of sand to Oxbow.
But that's the one thing that connects us.
Yes, totally. So yeah, I got to make lots of stuff. I'm still unpacking what the work is. I mean, I know what it is, but you know, it takes time. And this work will show up in the exhibition that will open at Spaces in mid-April. And so there's a whole kind of family of these forms sitting at ThinkBox in Cleveland right now, awaiting many, many layers of grinding from me. And then I'm kind of developing work as part of my time at the Dietrich collection as well. So I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like yet, but yeah, that's what I'm up to right now.
Do you feel like at Kohler, but I suppose really at any of your experiences being doing a kind of residency, do you feel like you often come away with the thing that you were expecting to when you embarked on the residency or embarked on the program? Like, did the results of your Kohler residency like meet your expectations, or did you end up coming out of it with something wholly different than what you had initially thought?
Well, I mean, I didn't expect to stay up there for so long and for this
Love
whole
that.
like, and that was very weird because I kind of had to, like, I was away from home, Chicago, but I was also away from home, Australia, and I had to make some decisions about like what I was going to do with myself. And so the whole, Oxford changed my life, but Kohler really changed my life. Like, having had to Oxford like perform being an artist and then go up to Kohler, which is completely different. I mean, even pre-pandemic, it was just for artists in this tiny town. So it's a completely different situation. But nevertheless, it's maybe the other side of the coin of kind of performing being an artist. You're the artist in a place where there aren't that many people doing the thing that is, whatever an artist does.
Yeah.
But I think, to answer your question, the proposal that I wrote to go to Kohler is very true to the way that the work is coming together now.
It is.
However, I deviated slightly at the start because I think I was so bamboozled, like about, all the opportunities, all of the ideas. You kind of like get to a place and you're like a kid in a candy store, when you have these amazing facilities. But I think that's okay to kind of let yourself, veer off momentarily. And I kind of actually very naturally deviated back to the project at hand. And I actually ended up making a lot more work than I ever even anticipated making. So I took an entire ton of metal back.
Whoa.
And I've been hauling it around. So it's in Cleveland now.
Well, part of the reason I wondered that too is that I know that with the Kohler residency, for example, they really try to counsel people to not be so certain about the outcome of their time in the factory, because people can come in sort of expecting like, oh, I'm going to fabricate this thing, and well, Faith Levine, when she was the residency director, would tell me how she often had to really counsel people that, hey, you might not really make what you think you are wanting to, or you are expecting to, because this is a really different setting for making work. It's not like your home studio. It's there's a learning curve in that factory. And so I wonder about that a lot, because it feels, I guess I wonder if it's still a place one can experiment, or if it feels more rigid because of the the scale of the operation, or the way you have to work with or relate to the factory to produce something. Did you feel like you could take risks and experiment and make mistakes, or did you feel like you had to be very pragmatic about how you, produced things?
Yeah, I mean, the learning curve is huge, and I completely skipped over that part. Like, it took me like 2 months, or I don't know how long we were in there for the first phase. It was maybe a little less than, it was like a month and a half. Like, so halfway through the residency is like sort of probably when you realize like how to get everything done and how to apply those processes to what it is that you want to do. And that's a huge thing. So there's something like 40 steps in getting from here all the way to this like piece at the end. There's so many tiny steps, and if you miss one, or if you don't do something properly, then the whole thing can kind of be compromised. And they're an industrial foundry. So all of the forms that they're casting have been engineered to perfection. So everything, it casts really well. So, you know, there's imperfections in castings and failed castings that happen all the time. And it's devastating when something breaks or when something doesn't work out and you've spent 2 weeks getting a mold together. So, you know, for all of the pieces that did get kind of finished, there are many forms that didn't kind of make it out of it in a kind of finished way. And then, I mean, the other thing is like the pieces that I'm really happy with and that I will kind of show as a kind of like a body of work, they came out of the initial goal to make these scaled up forms, but the way in which they're produced really replicates the kind of shell casting of like a bathtub or a sink, right? And I kind of like, when I applied for Kohler, I intuitively knew that that was like kind of the thing that I wanted to do, but I really had to go through the steps of failure to understand that, like, you know, I actually tried casting like small works, like 1-to-1 scale pieces, and I just didn't it just didn't translate because the facilities are so geared towards these kind of large pieces. So, you know, the work really ended up, like, the work is the way that it is because it was made there as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So,
sure. That the actual context kind of informed the feel of the work.
yeah, but I also love that. I mean, as a person who performs this tactic of design, like, for me, having those constraints is so interesting. And it also speaks to this kind of like hyper-masculine history of production technologies that continue to kind of like envelope this idea of like female and reproductive body into a specific set of parameters, right?
So can you give us a sense of the scale of the object you're showing us right now, just to put a finer point on what you just said?
Yeah, so this one, for example,
Yeah.
I'm really bad with inches off the fly. So this one is
Tell me
like
centimeters and I'll translate to inches.
No, I just need to compare it to this stool right here. This one would be like taller than this stool.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I mean, this one stayed up at Kohler and it's in their collection. This one is it's being held by the hoist. So it's a bit too heavy to kind of pick up and move around. But that's a solid casting, and that's one of the few solid castings that I made. I made a lot of these shell castings. So well, I guess I'm just not going to show you because you'll have to see the show. But I'm trying to go back to, I think it's just being a bit slow because there's videos in here, but these donuts here are sort of like this big, I guess.
Yeah. So like 20 times the size of the original object. I mean, 20 times the size of the object you're referencing.
Yeah, and so when I scaled them up, like, the goal with scaling them up is just to make them as big as possible and to make them so big that like I can handle them, and I can pick them up and stuff. And they're also kind of as big as the parameters that I had in which to produce them. So that's kind of like, you know, for me, that's the parameter. Like, do it in a way that also for me kind of suggests body.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can kind of cradle these things, which I think is kind of funny. So
You're not quite seeking out architectural scale yet.
no, not yet. But I really want to do like a massive bronze donut, like huge, like a stadium donut or toilet, I should say. You know, it's like a tribute to the female power.
Yeah, I was thinking about those Paul McCarthy butt plugs, you know, that were in the like giant ones that were in the I don't know, I forget what museum that was at in Europe, but it kind of looked like a Christmas tree. But that was it was a couple years back, and I thought, yeah, okay, Martha, you can have the sort of public art piece that is the giant interior contraceptive device that's on the front lawn.
Yes, and you know, we've all been there. We've all been inside of that place. So why not imagine it? Imagine it, yeah, its form as, you know, enormous torus. I mean, you know, there's actually some really amazing public art in Cleveland. There's actually so much good, big public art in this city. So, I don't know why. Oh, no, I do know why, actually. Someone told me this. Something about, there's something about taxation of cigarettes and alcohol in,
Okay.
I'm just going to totally butcher information right now, but there's something about this city or state that has, please chime in anyone who is going to help me not butcher this, but there's something about Cleveland, there's a lot of really amazing public art here. There's like a Tony Smith in Case Western Reserve University, like down the road from Think Box. Amazing.
Oh, fantastic. I don't have any idea about Cleveland's public art. But what a nice thing to be. Maybe that's like, you know, that's the context that's going to make an impact on you at this residency, is really thinking about what would be next for your work if it was incorporated into a public art scheme.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. That would be fun. I don't know how we got onto this. I feel like you brought it up though, Shannon. So
Yeah, well, you were just saying how at this point they were so large. You were enlarging them to sort of a scale that they could still be cradled and held, and then I said, well, but not architectural yet.
yes, that's right. And you know, I was thinking like Ragdale Ring,
Yeah.
Anyway, so amazing.
So we're getting close to the end of our chat, and I want to just let people know who are here, if they've got any questions for Martha, to you can throw them in the chat box, or you can go ahead and turn on your mic and ask them too. That would also be all right. Oh, hi, Michael. There you are with Jello shots.
I asked Oxford 2019 people to send me photos last night. That's Natalie in literally the best costume of the season. This is Michael Michael's performing my art practice by painting his face like a circle IUD.
Gorgeous.
Anyway, that was Oxford.
Oh,
this
yeah.
photo is courtesy of Natalie's sticker, by the way. So thanks, Natalie.
People need this pic. Well, tell us what's next then before we sign off. You're gonna be at Spaces in Cleveland for how long?
I'm in Cleveland till the mid to late April.
Uh-huh.
The show the show opens in the middle of April. I think it's the 15th. But now I've actually forgotten when it opens. It's maybe the 16th of April. So it's at Spaces in Cleveland, and they're an amazing institution. I feel really grateful to be having a space to show there, and it's really exciting. So yeah.
Is that
I'm not sure. We'll see.
Is that usually the outcome of a residency at Spaces, is that you have an exhibition at the end?
I think so. I don't know if there are Spaces people here. I feel like they should chime in, but I think so. I think people do residencies and then they have a show at the end. Yeah, there'll be another artist who's also showing some work as well in another gallery inside of Spaces. And their name escapes me right now, and I feel really bad about that. I'm sorry. They haven't arrived here, but I'm looking forward to meeting other artists. And things feel like, it's warming up here now, so, we can convene together safely, which is really exciting. Can't wait for that.
Well, make sure to let us know when the show is opening so we can circulate it in our channels too. We do like to showcase our alumni when they're up to stuff. Sierra, make sure to get that out into our social media channels. So we'll be sure to share your show with everyone.
I have a quick question, actually.
Michael, there you are.
This is just like a logistics when you like when you're thinking, or like when you're applying to these places and um you're there and you're making work, are you thinking about how to transport all this stuff out of the current? That's just because like sometimes, I mean, I make drawings and paintings, and sometimes that is hard to like move around. So I can only imagine like what like are these places giving you resources to like store? Are they just, or yeah.
Great question. I probably glazed over it, or I actually didn't even talk about the logistical side of making this kind of work. It's been a real education. Figuring out how to get stuff back and forth. Yeah, I mean, not to mention the fact that at some point I was kind of like thinking about whether or not I'd have to go back to Australia due to COVID, and don't even get me started on what it would even take to get this work home. So Kohler shipped my work back to Chicago. And then when it arrived in Chicago, I didn't have a studio there anymore. So I was lucky enough to have it stored at someone else's studio for 2 months. Hey, Stephen Hollenbeek, thanks so much for letting me put my stuff in your studio. That was 3 pallets of metal, big ask. And then while I tried to look for another studio, until I found like, so I need a studio now with a loading dock, and everything kind of needs to be hauled on, you know, various contraptions. And then, so I spent about 5 months back in Chicago figuring out logistics and starting to get myself ready to come to Cleveland. And a lot of that was logistics and also grinding a lot of metal. I'm actually still grinding and polishing. And then I drove a U-Haul from Chicago to Cleveland with all my metal in it. And they borrowed and stole pallets by way of friends who have a gallery and were great, like, you know, gave me a crate that was disused by them. So loaded everything into the crate and got it onto the U-Haul and then drove it up to Cleveland. And then when I got to Cleveland, the people at ThinkBox have been wonderful and have allowed me to bring all of the metal in, and it's occupying sort of like a large area on the ground floor of that space. And I'm finishing it there with their amazing facilities. And then ThinkBox is very close to Dittrich, so I can sort of jump between in terms of like, I'll be in ThinkBox filthy making work and then go to Dittrich with kind of different types of clean gloves on, looking at objects. So finishing the work there, and then the work will then be displayed at Spaces, and we'll just kind of drive it like, you know, multiple car loads into the back of the car and then into the gallery. Yeah. But yeah, it's
a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work that isn't making the work. Yeah.
Thank you. Miss you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Oh, also, Michael has a solo show right now open. It opened in New York last night, didn't it, Michael? Can we talk about that?
It is in New York, but also this is about you, so.
Well, congratulations, Michael, on his solo exhibition.
Well, thank you so much, Martha, for spending the evening with us and talking about your practice and talking about Oxbow and talking about residencies and talking about what it means to make big, heavy work and cart it back and forth across the country. And I know that everybody who joined us tonight appreciated you spending time with us, and people who will watch this video online will enjoy hearing about your work and learning more about your practice. So we really appreciate it. And we're happy to have you as a part of our Oxbow community and now a part of our archive of stories, our archive of Oxtails.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. This was lovely. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good luck in Cleveland, and do keep in touch with us. And I can't wait to see the public art piece that is a giant Taurus.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.